Why was the entire training ground laughing at her? The Arizona heat pressed down like a physical weight, 47 degrees Celsius. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer, that turns sweat to steam before it can cool you. And there she stood, Emma Hayes, 38 years old, light brown hair pulled into a simple bun, wearing a uniform so faded, so worn, it looked like it had survived a war. Maybe it had. Lieutenant Jake Morrison's voice cut through that heat like a blade. "Take off that uniform, right now, immediately." 30 elite soldiers, all watching, all already laughing, because to them Emma looked like someone's mother who'd wandered onto the wrong base. Her boots were scuffed, resolved at least twice. Her hands trembled, not much, just enough to notice, just enough to make her seem weak. "I said take it off." Jake stepped forward, using every inch of his 6'4" frame to intimidate. His face was flushed red, not from the heat, from anger. Civilians have no right wearing military uniforms. You could feel the mockery in the air, thick as the desert dust. Private Jessica Stone had her phone out, streaming the whole thing to her followers. "Some old lady just showed up to our special ops selection," she whispered into the camera. "This is going to be hilarious." Sergeant Kyle Rodriguez was already making bets. $10 says she's here to teach us sensitivity training," he called out, loud enough for Emma to hear. "Look at those hands shaking. Probably can't even hold a rifle steady." Emma didn't respond, didn't argue. She just slowly set her worn backpack on the ground. Those trembling hands moved to her jacket, started unbuttoning it. The laughter grew louder, crueler. These young soldiers thought they were watching an old woman being put in her place. They had no idea what was about to happen. The jacket slipped down, and the entire training ground froze. Time didn't just slow, it stopped. Across Emma's back and shoulders, ink told a story these soldiers couldn't comprehend. A massive tattoo, a black skull with the Roman numeral 13 beneath it. The words Death Brigade arched above. Sole Survivor curved below, and 12 blood-red stars arranged in a circle, like a constellation, like a memorial. Master Sergeant Victor Volkov saw it first. This seasoned Spetsnaz advisor, a man who'd survived conflicts most people couldn't pronounce, felt his legs give out. His face drained of all color, and he dropped to his knees, right there, in the middle of the training ground, in front of 30 arrogant young soldiers who didn't understand what they were seeing. But they would. Within 30 minutes, every single one of them would understand why a hardened combat veteran had just knelt before the woman they'd insulted. The morning had started so normally. Fort Thunder Special Operations Training Center, the premier facility for selecting candidates for the military's most dangerous missions, located deep in the Arizona desert, designed to break people down and rebuild them into weapons. The temperature had already climbed past 45 degrees by 7 in the morning. Emma had arrived in an old pickup truck, paint faded and peeling from years under harsh suns. Everything about her screamed that she didn't belong. The guard at the gate had barely glanced at her contractor credentials before waving her through. Just another civilian, just another nobody. She'd walked past the mockery with steady steps, despite that tremor. Despite the scuffed boots and the uniform with no unit patches, no rank insignia, just tired fabric worn too many times, she'd made her way to the equipment area and begun inspecting weapons with movements that were precise, professional, each rifle checked with an economy of motion that spoke of something deeper than training. It spoke of survival. Corporal Brad Tucker thought it would be funny to bump into her table, sent equipment clattering to the ground. "Oh, sorry, ma'am," he'd said with exaggerated politeness. "Didn't see you there. Maybe you should stick to the administrative building where it's safer for civilians." Emma had bent to retrieve the scattered equipment. Her fingers had moved with surprising speed, checking each component for damage. It was a small thing, but Viktor Volkov had noticed. The way she handled those weapon parts wasn't casual. It was automatic, muscle memory from years of experience. Instructor Mike Davis had decided to escalate. "Excuse me, ma'am. I think there's been a mistake. This area is restricted to selection candidates and training staff." Emma had looked up with calm brown eyes that showed no fear. "I'm here on authorization from Colonel Patterson. I'm observing the selection process." That's when Jake Morrison had arrived. Young, muscular, aggressive. The kind of officer who believed strength came from dominance. "Lady, do you have any idea where you are? This is a special operations selection course. We're training warriors here, not running a tourist attraction." His voice had risen to a shout. "That uniform is earned, not borrowed. You're disrespecting every soldier who's bled for the right to wear it. Take it off. Now." And Emma had complied, slowly, calmly, while 30 soldiers watched and laughed and prepared to enjoy her humiliation. But now the laughter had died. Now Jessica's phone was trembling in her hands. Now Kyle Rodriguez looked like he might be sick. Now Mike Davis was backing away, his face pale. Because Viktor Volkov was still on his knees, and he was crying. This man who'd seen horrors most people couldn't imagine. This veteran of wars fought in shadows. He was weeping. "Ghost 7, he whispered. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. "You're Ghost 7. Emma stood there in the scorching sun, tattoo exposed, hands still trembling, but her eyes held something these soldiers were only beginning to understand. Not weakness, not fear, something far more terrifying. Experience. Jake Morrison's mouth had gone dry. "What's going on? Who is she?" Viktor Volkov slowly rose to his feet. His voice was rough, heavy with emotion. "You just ordered a legend to take off her uniform. You just mocked the only person who survived what she survived. You just laughed at someone who's seen more hell than all of you combined." He turned to face the gathered soldiers. Death Brigade 13, 21 years ago, a nuclear facility deep in hostile territory. 14 operators went in. Only one came out. Emma pulled her jacket back on, slowly, those trembling hands working each button, and when she spoke, her voice carried that slight rasp, that damage from breathing air no one should breathe, from screaming orders no one should have to give. "The briefing starts in 10 minutes, she said simply. "I suggest you attend." She walked away, leaving 30 soldiers standing in shocked silence, leaving Viktor Volkov with tears still wet on his face, leaving questions hanging in the desert air like smoke. What had happened 21 years ago? What was Death Brigade? And why had 12 red stars been tattooed onto her skin like scars she chose to carry forever? The answers would come. But first, these arrogant young soldiers who thought they knew what strength looked like would have to face the truth. That real warriors didn't need to prove themselves. That true courage didn't announce itself. That the most dangerous people in any room were often the ones everyone underestimated. Emma Hayes had learned that lesson in blood and fire. Now it was their turn to learn. And something told them this education was going to cost more than they'd ever imagined paying. What had Ghost 7 survived, that turned a hardened Spetsnaz veteran into a weeping man on his knees? The briefing room felt smaller than it should. 30 soldiers packed into a space designed for 20. The air conditioning struggled against the desert heat, failed. Sweat trickled down faces, but no one moved, no one spoke. They just watched Emma Hayes set up a laptop at the front of the room with hands that still trembled. Viktor Volkov stood at the back, silent, his eyes never leaving Emma, like he was looking at a ghost. Maybe he was. Jake Morrison sat in the front row. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something uncomfortable, something that felt like shame but tasted like fear. He kept glancing at the other soldiers, looking for someone to share his confusion, finding only mirrors of his own uncertainty. Jessica Stone had put her phone away. The live stream had ended the moment that tattoo appeared. Her followers were blowing up her messages, demanding to know what happened. who that woman was, why a master sergeant had dropped to his knees, but Jessica had no answers, only questions, and a growing sense that she just made the biggest mistake of her military career. Emma connected the laptop to the projector. The screen flickered to life. No PowerPoint, no slides, just a single image, a memorial wall covered in stars, some red, some gold, too many to count. "Death Brigade," Emma said quietly. Her raspy voice carried in the silence. "How many of you have heard of it?" No hands went up, not one. Even Viktor Volkov stayed silent. "Good," Emma's expression didn't change. "That means the classification is holding. Death Brigade doesn't exist, never has. These missions never happened. The operators who died never served. Their families were told training accidents or classified operations, nothing more." She let that sink in, watched understanding dawn on young faces. "But before I explain what doesn't exist, I need to know who's staying in this room." Emma's eyes swept across them, calm, assessing. "Because once you hear this briefing, you can't unhear it. Once you understand what I'm about to offer, you can't unknow it. And some of you won't want to know. Some of you will realize you're not ready. That's fine, that's smart. The door is there. No judgment, no consequences, just leave now." No one moved. Pride, curiosity, stubborn refusal to look weak. Whatever the reason, 30 soldiers stayed in their seats. Emma nodded slowly, like she'd expected it, like she'd seen it before. "Death Brigade was created for missions that can't be accomplished any other way," she began. "Missions where success requires operators who are willing to die. Not might die, will die. Missions where survival isn't part of the plan, where the only question is how long you can hold before death takes you, how much you can accomplish before the inevitable happens." Kyle Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "You're talking about suicide missions." "No," Emma's voice was sharp. "Suicide is giving up. Suicide is hopelessness. Death Brigade is choice. It's operators who understand the mathematics, who calculate the cost and decide they're willing to pay it, who look at a mission that will save thousands and costs 13 lives and they volunteer. Because someone has to stand in the breach. Someone always has to stand in the breach." She pulled up another image. 14 faces, young, confident, smiling. The kind of photos taken before deployment, before reality strips away innocence. "Death Brigade 13, Emma said softly. 21 years ago, a terrorist organization had seized a nuclear facility, not just seized it, weaponized it. They had material enough to create dirty bombs that would devastate 3 American cities. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, millions of lives, but the facility was built into a mountain, deep, hardened, designed to survive conventional strikes. And any attempt to destroy it from the outside would release radiation that would kill everyone within 100 miles, including the 2,000 civilians being held hostage inside." The room had gone deathly quiet. Even breathing seemed loud. "Command calculated every option," Emma continued. "Siege would take months. The terrorists would detonate before we broke through. Airstrikes would cause the very catastrophe we were trying to prevent. Special insertion teams couldn't reach the core without heavy equipment that couldn't be transported quietly. Every conventional solution ended in millions of casualties. So they created an unconventional solution." Emma's hand moved to her shoulder, to where the tattoo lay hidden beneath fabric. 14 volunteers, experts in demolitions, nuclear physics, close-quarters combat intelligence. We would infiltrate, reach the reactor core, destroy the facility from the inside in a way that contained the radiation, and hold the position long enough for the destruction to be complete and the civilians to be evacuated. "The mission timeline was 18 hours, Emma said. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they're describing something too painful to feel. "Intelligence estimated we had 6 hours before we'd be discovered, 2 hours to reach the core, 4 hours to prepare the controlled destruction, 6 hours to hold while the reactor melted down properly and the civilians were evacuated. 18 hours total. We had supplies for 12. Jake Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. You knew you weren't coming out. We knew. Emma met his eyes. Every one of us knew. We discussed it, debated it, calculated every alternative, and then we volunteered. Because 14 lives for millions isn't just mathematics. It's duty, it's honor. It's the choice warriors make when there are no good options left, only necessary ones. She advanced the slide. The same 14 faces, but different now, gear, weapons, eyes hard with determination, ready. We infiltrated at 0300 hours. Emma's voice took on a rhythmic quality, like she was reciting from memory, like she'd told this story 1,000 times in her nightmares. Reached the outer perimeter at 0415. First contact at 0530. 3 hours earlier than intelligence predicted. Someone had betrayed us. Someone had sold us out, and the enemy was waiting. The screen changed. Combat footage, grainy, night vision green, muzzle flashes, explosions, bodies falling. We fought through, Emma said. Lost 2 in the first engagement. Sarah Chen, Marcus Rivera, they bought us the time to reach the facility. Their sacrifice meant something. It had to mean something. Her hands were shaking worse now, but her voice stayed steady. We reached the core at 0600. Kyle Thompson began preparing the charges. The rest of us set up defensive positions, and then we realized the truth. The intelligence was wrong about more than just the timeline. The facility was bigger, the reactor more complex. The destruction would take 12 hours, not 4, 12. And we only had supplies for 12 total, which meant no time for evacuation, no time for retreat, just time to complete the mission and die holding the position. Brad Tucker spoke up, his earlier arrogance gone. What did you do? We voted, Emma said simply. Democracy in hell, 12 of us left. We could abort, try to escape, hope for another solution, or we could finish what we started, except that we were already dead, make our deaths count. She paused, let the weight of that choice settle. It was unanimous, she continued. We would hold, whatever it took, however long it took, we would complete the mission, and we accepted what that meant. No rescue, no escape, just duty, just honor, just the knowledge that our names would never be known but our sacrifice would save millions who would never know our names. The screen showed more combat footage, desperate, brutal, operators fighting with everything they had. They came in waves, Emma's voice roughened. Hundreds of them, they knew what we were doing, knew we were destroying their prize, their weapon, their leverage, and they threw everything at us. For 11 hours we held, 11 hours of constant combat, 11 hours watching my team die one by one, Patrick O'Connor holding the East Corridor, Lin Zhang covering our 6, Michael Davidson buying Kyle time to finish the charges. They died fighting. They died heroes. And their names will never be on any memorial, except the one I carry on my skin. Tears were streaming down Jessica Stone's face. She didn't bother wiping them away. By hour 10, there were 3 of us left, Emma said. Kyle, Monica Harris, and me. The charges were set. The reactor was beginning its controlled meltdown. The radiation levels were climbing. We had maybe an hour before exposure killed us even if the enemy didn't, and they kept coming, endless, relentless, because they knew. They knew if they could reach that core, could disrupt the process, could stop the meltdown, they could still use that facility, still create their weapons, still threaten millions. Monica died at hour 11. Emma's voice broke, just slightly, just enough to reveal the human beneath the soldier. Took a burst protecting Kyle, went down still firing, still fighting, still buying him time to verify the charges. Her last words were mission first. Like we'd been taught, like we'd promised, like it mattered more than living. The screen showed a single figure now, a woman covered in blood, some hers, most not, fighting with the desperate energy of someone with nothing left to lose. Kyle finished the sequence at 11 hours 43 minutes, Emma continued. The meltdown was locked, irreversible, nothing could stop it now. The facility would be destroyed, the material contained, the threat eliminated, and in 13 minutes the radiation would kill anyone still in that core, including us. He looked at me, Emma whispered. Kyle looked at me with these eyes full of pain and pride and peace, and he said, "Get out, boss. One of us should survive. One of us should tell them what we did." But I couldn't leave him, couldn't abandon my last team member, so I said, "We finish together." Because that's what Death Brigade meant, together to the end. Viktor Volkov was crying again, silent tears on a weathered face. "And then Kyle pushed me through the security door," Emma said, her voice hollow. "Locked it behind me." I screamed, fought the controls, but he'd overridden them, sealed himself inside, and he looked at me through that reinforced glass and smiled. Actually smiled, and he said, "Someone has to tell them, someone has to remember, be our ghost, Emma, be our witness. Tell them we mattered." Then the radiation took him, and I ran. The room was silent except for Emma's raspy breathing, and the sound of 30 soldiers trying not to cry. "I barely made it out," Emma finished. "The facility collapsed 18 minutes later. The meltdown was complete, the threat eliminated, 2,000 civilians evacuated safely, millions of lives saved, and 13 names that would never be honored, 13 heroes who died following orders, my orders, 13 stars I carry because someone has to remember, someone has to witness, someone has to be the ghost." She turned off the projector, faced the soldiers in the dim light. "That's what Death Brigade means," she said quietly. "That's what I survived. That's why Master Sergeant Volkov knelt, not because I'm special, because I carry 13 ghosts on my skin and 1,000 more in my memory, because I'm the woman who sends heroes to die, and I live with that, every single day." Jake Morrison stood up, walked to the front of the room, and without a word he saluted, sharp, precise, full of respect he hadn't shown before. Emma returned it, then she looked at the rest of them. "I'm here because a new threat has emerged," she said. "A mission that can't be accomplished conventionally. A threat that requires operators willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. I'm here to select Death Brigade 15. 13 volunteers who understand the cost, who accept the price, who are willing to trade their lives for the lives of those they've sworn to protect." She paused, let them process. "But there's something you need to understand about what happened that day in Arizona," Emma said. "Something I haven't told you yet. Something that changes everything." What secret had Emma kept hidden even from her own story? The soldiers leaned forward, unconsciously, drawn by the weight of unfinished truth. Emma Hayes stood at the front of that briefing room with the patience of someone who'd learned to carry impossible burdens. She'd survived when her team hadn't, lived when dying would have been easier, and now she was asking others to walk the path she'd walked. But first, they needed to understand the whole truth. "Kyle Thompson didn't push me out to save my life," Emma said quietly. "He pushed me out because I was already dying. The radiation exposure from those 11 hours, the wounds I'd taken, the blood I'd lost. Medical said I had maybe 12 hours, maybe less. Kyle knew that, everyone knew that. And he realized if I stayed in that core, I'd die for nothing. But if I got out, if I survived long enough to report, then at least someone would know what happened, what we accomplished, what it cost." She pulled up her sleeve, showed them scars, not from combat, from medical procedures, surgeries, treatments. "I spent 8 months in a classified medical facility," Emma continued. "Experimental treatments for radiation poisoning, surgeries to repair the nerve damage that makes my hands shake, therapy to process the survivor's guilt that nearly killed me more surely than any bullet. I wanted to die. Every day for those 8 months, I wanted to join my team, because surviving felt like betrayal, because breathing felt like stealing life from the ones who'd earned it more than I had." Viktor Volkov spoke for the first time since the briefing began. "But you didn't die." "No," Emma met his eyes. "I didn't, because Kyle's last order was to live, to witness, to remember. And disobeying a direct order from a dying team member isn't something I could do, so I lived, even though it hurt. Even though every day felt like drowning, I lived. And I decided if I had to carry this burden, I'd make it count. I'd make sure Death Brigade continued. That when the next impossible mission came, when the next choice between 13 lives and millions had to be made, there would be operators ready. Volunteers who understood. Warriors who chose duty over survival. She lowered her sleeve, covered the scars. "That's why I'm here," she said. "That's why I came to Fort Thunder looking like a broken-down contractor, because I needed to see you, really see you, not the personas you project, not the warriors you pretend to be. The real you, the one that emerges when you think no one important is watching, when you think you can get away with mockery, when you believe there are no consequences for cruelty." The words hit like punches. Jake Morrison looked like he wanted to disappear. Jessica Stone was openly crying now. Kyle Rodriguez had his head in his hands. "I needed to know," Emma continued, her voice gentle but unyielding, "if you were the kind of people who could become heroes, or if you were just soldiers playing at heroism. Because Death Brigade doesn't need the strongest, doesn't need the fastest, doesn't need the most skilled. It needs the ones who will hold when holding seems impossible, who will choose sacrifice when survival is an option, who understand that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to lay down your life for something bigger than yourself." She began packing, slowly, her movements deliberate despite the tremor. "Every Death Brigade starts the same way," Emma explained. "I observe a selection course, watch candidates who think they're elite, who believe themselves unbreakable, and I see who they really are when they think it doesn't matter, when they think their actions have no weight. Some fail immediately. The ones who are cruel, who need to dominate, who can't see beyond their own ego, they'll never make it, because Death Brigade requires humility, requires understanding that you're not the hero of this story. You're a tool, a weapon, a sacrifice offered willingly for the greater good." She stopped packing, faced them directly. "Some of you failed today," she said bluntly. "The ones who laughed, who mocked, who thought humiliating an old woman was entertainment. You showed me you're not ready. Maybe you never will be. Maybe that's fine. Not everyone needs to be Death Brigade material. The conventional military needs good soldiers too, but you won't be selected for this mission. You don't have what it takes." The room felt colder, heavier. Several soldiers looked relieved, some looked devastated. "Some of you," Emma's voice softened, "showed me something different. Corporal Chen, you didn't laugh when everyone else was mocking. You stayed quiet, watched, assessed. You saw something others missed. That's the kind of awareness Death Brigade needs, specialist tours. You helped me pick up that equipment Brad knocked over. You didn't have to, no one would have noticed, but you did it anyway. That's the kind of character we need. Private Williams, you looked uncomfortable with the mockery, didn't participate. That kind of moral compass matters more than marksmanship." She paused, let them understand. "Death Brigade isn't about being the best warrior," Emma said. "It's about being the right person, the one who can face death with dignity, who can hold the line not because they're fearless but because they're afraid and do it anyway, who understand that heroism isn't about glory, it's about duty, it's about sacrifice. It's about making the hard choice when every fiber of your being screams to choose the easy one." Viktor Volkov stepped forward. "How many selections have you conducted?" 14, Emma answered. "Since I recovered, since I took on this responsibility. 14 times I've observed arrogant soldiers, assessed their character, selected 13 volunteers, briefed them on missions they wouldn't survive, and sent them to their deaths. 14 death brigades. 182 operators who chose duty over survival, 182 names that will never be honored publicly, 182 ghosts I carry." The weight of that confession settled over the room like ash. "The tattoo on my back," Emma continued. "It started with 12 stars, one for each member of Death Brigade 13, but every time I select a new brigade, every time 13 more heroes die following my orders, I add another star. I'm up to 194 now. 182 red stars for team members, 12 gold stars for the other brigade commanders who carried this burden before passing it to me. Each star represents a life traded for lives saved. Each one is a name I remember, a face I see every time I close my eyes, a voice I hear in quiet moments." Jake Morrison found his voice. "How do you live with it?" "Poorly," Emma admitted. "I don't sleep well, don't eat much. The tremor in my hands is partly radiation damage, partly stress. I have nightmares that would break most people. I've been in therapy for 21 years and probably will be for 21 more. I live with the knowledge that I'm a monster. A necessary monster, maybe, but a monster nonetheless. Because I'm the woman who looks at 13 lives and calculates their worth in millions of lives saved. Who reduces human beings to numbers on a ledger. Who sends heroes to die and lives with the guilt. She met each soldier's eyes in turn. But I do it anyway, she said. Because someone has to, because these missions exist. Because threats emerge that can't be handled conventionally. Because there are enemies who count on us being unwilling to make the hard choices, to pay the ultimate prices. And if I don't select these brigades, if I don't prepare these operators, if I don't send them to complete these missions, then the millions they would have saved die instead. So I carry the guilt, bear the weight, live with the ghosts, because that's my burden. My sacrifice, the price I pay for being the one who survived. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of failing air conditioning and the sound of hearts beating too fast. The current threat, Emma began, her voice shifting to operational briefing mode, is a biological weapons facility, engineered pathogens that could devastate multiple continents. The facility can't be destroyed conventionally without releasing the very weapons it contains. It requires operators who can infiltrate, secure the pathogens properly, destroy the facility safely, and hold the position during the controlled destruction process. Timeline is estimated at 19 hours. Survival probability is 0. Success probability, if the right operators are selected, is 94%. Failure means 40 million casualties minimum. She let that number hang in the air. I need 13 volunteers, Emma said. Specialists in biological containment, demolitions, combat medicine, communications, and close quarters combat. Operators who understand they're signing their death warrants, who accept that their families will be told training accidents or classified casualties, who grasp that their sacrifice will never be publicly honored, who choose duty anyway, who stand in the breach because someone has to, who understand that sometimes the greatest heroism is dying in silence so others can live in ignorance of how close they came to devastation. She pulled out a tablet, brought up a form. This is a volunteer statement, Emma explained. It's classified above top secret. It acknowledges you understand the mission is suicide, that you're volunteering anyway, that you waive all rights to public recognition, that you accept classification of your death for a minimum of 50 years, that you do this not for glory but for duty, for honor, for the millions who will never know your name but will live because you died. She set the tablet on the table at the front of the room. I'll be conducting individual interviews over the next 72 hours, Emma said. Some of you have already disqualified yourselves through your actions today. Others will disqualify yourselves when you truly understand what's being asked. Some will volunteer and I'll reject you anyway, because I won't select operators who aren't ready, who don't have what it takes, who would compromise the mission. This isn't about volunteering. It's about being chosen, being found worthy of the sacrifice. She began gathering her materials, preparing to leave them with their thoughts, their fears, their impossible choice. One more thing, Emma said, pausing at the door. The mockery today, the cruelty, the assumption that a trembling old woman didn't deserve respect, that's exactly what enemies count on. They look at someone like me and see weakness. They underestimate, dismiss, assume. And that's when we strike, when being underestimated becomes the greatest weapon, when quiet strength proves more deadly than loud bravado, when dignity speaks through action rather than words. She opened the door. Desert heat poured in. Real warriors don't need to prove themselves to everyone, Emma said quietly. They only need to prove themselves when it matters, in the moments that count, when lives hang in the balance. That's when character reveals itself. That's when heroes emerge, not from the ones who shout loudest, but from the ones who stand quietest, who hold firmest, who sacrifice most willingly. She walked out, left them sitting in stunned silence, left them wondering if they had what it took, if they could become the kind of person who volunteers to die, if they understood what true heroism meant. And somewhere in that room, 13 future ghosts sat unaware. 13 people who would hear Emma's words and recognize themselves, who would volunteer knowing the cost, who would trade their lives for millions of strangers, who would become the heroes whose names would never be known. They just didn't realize it yet. But Emma knew. She'd seen it before, recognized the signs, the subtle tells of character that mattered more than skill, and over the next 72 hours she would confirm what she already suspected. That among these flawed, arrogant, uncertain soldiers were 13 who would choose to stand in the breach, 13 who would hold the line, 13 who would die with dignity so others could live. Because someone always had to stand in the breach. And Death Brigade never died, they just went darker. Why were the strongest ones always the first to volunteer? 72 hours. That's how long Emma gave them. 3 days to process, to question, to decide if they had the courage to volunteer for their own execution. And she watched them, every moment, every interaction, because the true character of a person isn't revealed in moments of clarity. It's revealed in the spaces between, in how they treat each other when they think she's not looking, in what they do when the weight of impossible choices presses down. Jake Morrison was the first to request an interview. Emma wasn't surprised. The lieutenant had spent the last 3 days in a state of visible agony. Shame had replaced his earlier arrogance. He'd apologized to Viktor Volkov, actually apologized, took responsibility for his actions. That mattered, not enough to erase what he'd done, but enough to show growth, to demonstrate he was capable of recognizing his failures. They met in a small office, just Emma and Jake, no witnesses, no recording devices, just 2 soldiers having a conversation that would determine if one of them would die. "I want to volunteer," Jake said immediately. No preamble, no explanation, just raw honesty. "Why?" Emma's voice was gentle. She wasn't interrogating, she was understanding. "Because I need to." Jake's hands clenched, unclenched, a nervous gesture he probably didn't realize he was making. "Not to prove anything, not to erase what I did. I know I can't undo mocking you, can't take back that arrogance, but maybe I can do something that matters. Maybe I can make my life count for something more than ego and insecurity." "You're 26, Emma observed. Your whole life ahead of you, career, family, everything. And you want to trade it for what? Redemption." "No," Jake met her eyes. "Redemption is selfish. It's about making myself feel better. This is about duty. About understanding that if 13 lives can save 40 million, then the mathematics are clear. And if I have the skills you need, the character you're looking for, then refusing to volunteer would be the real cowardice." Emma studied him, saw past the words to the truth beneath. Jake Morrison was terrified, absolutely terrified. He didn't want to die, didn't want to volunteer. Every survival instinct he possessed was screaming at him to walk away. But he was here anyway, offering himself, because he'd glimpsed something in her briefing, something that changed how he saw the world. "Tell me about your family," Emma said softly. Jake's expression flickered. "Mom, Dad, little sister. Sarah, she's 14. Wants to join the army like her big brother, thinks I'm some kind of hero. If you volunteer, if you're selected, she'll be told you died in a training accident," Emma said bluntly. "Your parents will be told the same. They'll never know the truth, never understand what you accomplished, never have the chance to be proud of the real heroism. They'll just grieve a son who died in what seems like a pointless accident. Can you accept that?" Jake was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Sarah looks up to me, and right now I'm not worth looking up to. I'm the guy who mocked a war hero, who used his rank to bully, who cared more about appearing strong than being strong. If I volunteer, if I'm selected, if I die completing this mission, then maybe that's the best thing I can give her. Not a hero she can brag about, but a brother who finally learned what mattered, even if she never knows. Even if I'm the only one who knows, that's enough." Emma made a note on her tablet. You understand you're not selected yet. This interview doesn't guarantee anything. I understand. Jake stood, prepared to leave, then paused. Ma'am, Ghost 7, whatever I should call you, I just want to say I'm sorry for what I did. How I treated you, I was wrong. And whether you select me or not, whether I live or die, I need you to know that I'm sorry. I know, Emma said simply, and she did. Could see it in every line of his body, every word he spoke. Jake Morrison had been transformed by shame, broken by recognition of his failures, and that breaking had revealed someone worth rebuilding. Jessica Stone came next, the social media influencer with the phone always ready, the one who'd streamed Emma's humiliation for entertainment. She looked different now, smaller, like she'd shed something heavy and found herself lighter but somehow diminished. I deleted the stream, Jessica said immediately. Deleted all my accounts. I know it doesn't matter, can't undo what I did, but I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep using real life as content, not after understanding what real sacrifice looks like. Why are you here? Emma asked. Jessica's laugh was bitter. Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me thinks I'm here to punish myself, to volunteer because I feel guilty, to die because I deserve it after what I did. But that's selfish, isn't it? Death Brigade isn't about punishment, it's about duty. And I don't know if I have what it takes. Don't know if I'm volunteering for the right reasons or just trying to assuage my conscience. Emma appreciated the honesty. What are your skills? Communications, social engineering. I'm good at understanding how information flows, how people think, how to manipulate narratives. Jessica's voice was flat, clinical. I spent years crafting an online persona, creating content that would go viral. Understanding psychological triggers, it's shallow, meaningless, but it might be useful. If you need someone who can understand human behavior, predict responses, exploit weaknesses, and you're willing to die using those skills. I don't know, Jessica admitted. I'm terrified, absolutely terrified, but I keep thinking about what you said, about how the greatest heroism is dying in silence, about sacrifice for millions who will never know, and I wonder if maybe that's the only thing that could give meaning to my life. Not followers, not likes, not fame, but dying for something real, something that matters, even if no one ever knows my name. Emma made more notes. Jessica Stone was honest about her doubts. That mattered. The ones who claimed certainty were lying to Emma or to themselves, but Jessica acknowledged her fear, her uncertainty, her struggle with motivations. That kind of self-awareness was rare, valuable. Over 72 hours, Emma interviewed 17 candidates. Some she dismissed immediately. Brad Tucker volunteered but couldn't articulate why beyond vague notions of heroism. He wanted glory, recognition. The idea of dying unknown repelled him. He wasn't ready, might never be. Sergeant Kyle Rodriguez volunteered for all the right reasons. Technical expertise, understanding of the mission parameters, genuine commitment to duty, but Emma saw something else. Saw the way he talked about his expertise, the subtle arrogance, the belief that his skills made him essential. That kind of thinking got people killed, got missions compromised. Emma thanked him for volunteering, didn't select him. He needed more seasoning, more humility, more understanding that skills meant nothing without character. But 13 emerged, 13 who had something Emma recognized, not fearlessness. Fear was essential, kept you sharp, kept you focused. But courage, the kind of courage that acknowledges terror and acts anyway, that understands the cost and pays it willingly, that sees the mathematics and accepts the equation. Private Maria Santos, quiet, competent, combat medic with steady hands and a steadier heart. She volunteered because she'd spent 3 years saving lives and realized sometimes the greatest act of healing was preventing mass casualties, even at the cost of her own life. Corporal David Chen, demolitions expert with a gift for precision. He volunteered because he understood that destroying the biological facility properly required someone willing to stay with the charges, to make sure they detonated correctly, to hold the position even when evacuation was possible, because success mattered more than survival. Specialist Emma Tours. No relation, just the coincidence of a shared name. Combat engineer who understood structural integrity, how to bring down buildings without releasing what they contained. She volunteered because she'd lost her sister in a terrorist attack, understood what it meant to be one of the millions saved by someone else's sacrifice, wanted to be the someone for someone else. And others, 13 total, each with skills, each with character, each with reasons that were honest, that acknowledged fear and chose duty anyway, that understood they were signing their death warrants and did it because someone had to stand in the breach. Emma briefed them together, all 13, showed them the mission parameters, the facility layout, the timeline, the probability matrices, made sure they understood exactly what they were volunteering for, what it would cost, how it would end. "You'll be designated Death Brigade 15, Emma explained. "I'll be Ghost 7, your commander, but I won't be going with you. My role is selection, training, coordination. I watch from command. Listen to your final transmissions. Carry your ghosts, but I don't die with you. That's my burden, surviving, remembering, bearing the weight of sending heroes to their deaths." Jake Morrison spoke up. "Ma'am, that seems wrong. You shouldn't have to carry that alone." "It's not about should," Emma said gently. "It's about necessity. Someone has to select future brigades. Someone has to maintain the institutional knowledge. Someone has to be the witness. Kyle Thompson taught me that, forced me to survive so I could tell the story. And I've learned he was right. Death Brigade needs its ghosts, needs someone to remember, someone to honor the sacrifice even in classification, someone to make sure each death counts." She paused, let them absorb that. "But there's something I need to tell you," Emma continued. "Something that's been weighing on me since I started this briefing, since I watched you volunteer, since I accepted your sacrifices." The 13 leaned forward, sensing something important. "What you did today," Emma said quietly. "Volunteering for this mission, accepting death, choosing duty, that's the easy part. The hard part comes in training, in the weeks we'll spend preparing, in the moments when you realize exactly what you volunteered for, when the abstract becomes concrete, when death stops being a concept and becomes a calendar date. That's when volunteers break, when heroes falter, when the real selection happens." She met each of their eyes. "Some of you won't make it through training," Emma said bluntly. "Not because you lack skills, but because you'll realize you don't have what it takes mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You'll withdraw your volunteer statement, and that's fine. That's smart. Better to realize it in training than on mission. Better to step back now than fail when millions depend on you." "How many usually withdraw?" Maria Santos asked. "Varies," Emma admitted. Death Brigade 7 had no withdrawals. All 13 made it to mission. Death Brigade 11 had 4. We had to conduct emergency selection to replace them. Every brigade is different, every volunteer unique. There's no predicting who'll make it and who won't. That's why training exists, to find out, to test, to push until we know who has what it takes. She stood, prepared to dismiss them. "Training starts tomorrow at 0500, Emma said. "It will be 6 weeks of hell. 6 weeks designed to break you, to show you exactly what you're facing, to prepare you for the 19 hours that will define your lives and end them. 6 weeks to become weapons, to become heroes, to become the 13 who stand in the breach when no one else can." The 13 stood, prepared to leave, prepared to face whatever came next. But Emma had one more thing to say. "Strength isn't about who volunteers first," she said quietly. "It's about who holds firmest when holding seems impossible. Remember that, in the weeks ahead, when everything in you screams to quit, when survival instinct wars with duty, when you question why you volunteered, remember, real strength isn't loud, isn't proud, isn't about proving anything. It's quiet, steady, enduring. It's standing in the breach not because you're unafraid, but because you're terrified and do it anyway." They left, 13 volunteers who would become 13 ghosts, 13 people who would die so millions could live, 13 names Emma would carry for the rest of her life. And as she watched them go, Emma Hayes touched her shoulder where 194 stars waited, where 13 more would soon be added, where the weight of necessary sacrifice pressed down like the Arizona sun. Someone had to select them, someone had to prepare them, someone had to send them to die. That was her burden, her sacrifice, the price of being Ghost 7. And she would pay it, again and again. For as long as threats existed that required Death Brigade, for as long as heroes volunteered, for as long as millions needed someone to stand in the breach. Because someone always had to stand in the breach. But what no one knew yet was that this mission would be different from all the others. The training was designed to simulate hell, 6 weeks of scenarios that pushed human limits, sleep deprivation, stress positions, impossible tactical problems with no good solutions, constant evaluation, constant pressure, constant testing of whether these 13 volunteers truly had what it took. Emma watched them struggle, watched them break, watched them rebuild themselves. Private James Walker withdrew after week 2. The biological containment training had shown him exactly what those pathogens could do, the videos of what uncontained release looked like, the simulations of agonizing death. He'd looked at that future and realized he wasn't ready. Emma had thanked him for his honesty, conducted emergency selection to replace him, brought in Corporal Lisa Chang, who'd been her second choice initially. Week 3 broke Specialist Marcus Johnson, not physically, mentally. The psychological evaluation revealed something Emma should have caught earlier. Marcus had volunteered not from duty but from depression, from a death wish masquerading as heroism. That kind of motivation was poison, would compromise the mission, would get others killed. Emma dismissed him, ordered mandatory therapy, brought in Private Samuel Wright as replacement. By week 4, the 13 had solidified. No more withdrawals, no more doubts, just grim determination. They'd seen what they were facing, understood the cost, accepted it, and something had crystallized in that acceptance. A unity, a purpose, a transformation from individual soldiers into something more. Death Brigade 15 was forming. Emma pushed them harder, tactical simulations that mimicked the facility layout, timed exercises in demolitions and containment, scenarios where they had to choose between mission success and survival, again and again, until the choice became automatic, until mission completion was hardwired into their decision-making. She watched Jake Morrison evolve. The arrogant lieutenant from 3 months ago was gone, replaced by someone quieter, steadier, someone who led not through dominance but through competence, through care for his team, through understanding that leadership meant sacrifice, meant making the hard calls, meant carrying the weight so others didn't have to. Jessica Stone had transformed too. The social media influencer had discovered real purpose, real meaning. She'd taken her communication skills and weaponized them, became the team's intelligence analyst, the one who could predict enemy responses, understand behavioral patterns, exploit psychological weaknesses, and she did it all with a quiet competence that suggested she'd finally found what she was looking for, not followers, not fame, but importance, value, a reason to exist that mattered. Maria Santos became the heart of the team, the steady presence, the one who kept them together when stress threatened to fracture unity. Her medical expertise made her essential, but her emotional intelligence made her invaluable. She knew when someone was struggling, knew how to help without making it obvious, knew how to maintain morale when morale should have been impossible. Week 5 brought the final test, a 72-hour simulation, no sleep, constant pressure, tactical problems designed to be impossible. Emma and Victor Volkov watched from the control room as Death Brigade 15 struggled, failed, adapted, overcame. "They're ready," Victor said quietly. He'd been observing the training, offering advice based on his own experience with impossible missions. "Better than ready. This is the strongest brigade I've seen." Emma didn't disagree, but readiness didn't guarantee survival, didn't guarantee success, just increased the probability. And in Death Brigade mathematics, increasing probability from 90% to 94% meant 2 million additional lives saved. The mission was scheduled for 3 weeks out, enough time for final preparations, equipment checks, intelligence updates, personal affairs. Each member of Death Brigade 15 had written letters to loved ones, letters that would be delivered after their deaths, letters that couldn't tell the truth but tried to convey meaning anyway. Jake Morrison's letter to his sister Sarah was heartbreaking. Emma had read it as part of protocol, ensuring no classified information was disclosed. He'd written about being proud of her, about wanting her to be strong, about hoping she'd understand someday that some things mattered more than living. It was the letter of someone who'd found purpose, who understood sacrifice, who wanted to share that understanding even if he couldn't share the details. Jessica Stone's letter to her parents was simpler, an apology for wasted years, a thank you for their patience, a promise that her life had meant something in the end, even if they'd never know what, even if the truth stayed classified. She'd found meaning. That had to be enough. Maria Santos hadn't written letters. Instead, she'd recorded a video message for her niece, a little girl who called Maria her hero. In the video, Maria talked about courage, about duty, about standing up when standing up was hard. She talked about choosing to do the right thing even when the right thing cost everything. And she smiled, actually smiled, like she'd made peace with her choice. Emma watched all of it, read all the letters, viewed all the videos, added each piece to the file she maintained. The classified record of Death Brigade 15. The documentation that would gather dust for 50 years before being released to a world that no longer remembered the threat these heroes died to stop. 2 weeks before the mission, intelligence updated. The biological facility had increased security, changed protocols. The timeline was now more compressed, 22 hours instead of 19. 3 additional hours of holding against impossible odds. 3 more hours of suffering before death finally came. Emma briefed Death Brigade 15 on the changes, watched their faces, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that the updated parameters were too much. She saw only determination, only acceptance, only warriors who'd already made their choice and wouldn't reconsider regardless of how the cost increased. "We can delay," Emma offered. "Wait for conditions to improve, find another solution." Jake Morrison spoke for the team. "Ma'am, respectfully, no, every day we delay is another day that facility exists, another day those weapons could be deployed, another day millions of people live in danger they don't know about. We're ready. We've been ready. Let's finish this." The others nodded. Agreement, unity, purpose. Emma had sent 14 brigades to their deaths, had watched 182 operators volunteer to die, had carried their ghosts for years, but something about Death Brigade 15 felt different, felt heavier, maybe because she'd watched their transformation, seen Jake Morrison evolve from arrogant lieutenant to selfless leader, watched Jessica Stone find meaning beyond fame, observed Maria Santos become the steady heart that held them together. Or maybe it was because Emma was getting older, the radiation damage progressing, the tremor in her hands worsening, the knowledge that she might only have a few more brigades in her, that Death Brigade 15 might be among the last she selected, the last she sent to die, the last ghost she collected. 1 week before the mission, Emma conducted final individual briefings, one-on-one sessions with each operator, last chance to withdraw, last chance to reconsider, last chance to choose survival. None withdrew, none reconsidered, they'd all made their choice, and they were at peace with it. "Why?" Emma asked Maria Santos during her session. "Why are you at peace with dying?" Maria considered the question carefully. "Because I'm not dying for nothing. I'm dying so 40 million people live. That's not tragedy, that's mathematics, that's duty. That's the best trade anyone could hope to make. My one life for millions of lives. How is that not the definition of purpose?" Emma had no answer to that, because Maria was right. The mathematics were clear, the purpose obvious, the sacrifice necessary, and yet Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that this mission was different, that Death Brigade 15 was walking into something worse than death. But she couldn't articulate what, couldn't identify the source of her unease, could only watch and wait and pray that her intuition was wrong. 3 days before the mission, the team conducted final equipment checks, loaded for a mission they wouldn't return from. Each operator carried enough supplies for 36 hours, knowing they'd only need 22. The extra was hope, futile hope, but hope nonetheless. Emma watched them prepare, saw the quiet professionalism, the dark humor that warriors use to cope with impossible stress, the small rituals that gave meaning to chaos. Jake Morrison cleaning his weapon for the third time, Jessica Stone reviewing communication protocols obsessively, Maria Santos checking medical supplies she probably wouldn't live long enough to use. They were ready as anyone could be, as ready as Death Brigade ever got. But Emma's unease persisted, grew stronger, and on the night before deployment she pulled Viktor Volkov aside. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. "I can feel it. This mission is different." Viktor studied her with eyes that had seen too much. Every mission feels different when you care about the operators. You've seen them transform, watched them become heroes. That makes it harder, makes the sacrifice feel more real. But it doesn't change the necessity, doesn't change the mathematics. "I know," Emma whispered. "I know, but I can't shake this feeling, like I'm sending them into something worse than death, like the mission parameters are wrong, like intelligence is incomplete, like we're missing something critical." "Did you voice these concerns to command?" "Yes, they checked everything. Intelligence is solid, mission parameters accurate, success probability holding at 94%, but 94 isn't 100, and that 6%, that margin of error, it keeps haunting me. What if this is the mission that fails? What if Death Brigade 15 dies and the facility isn't destroyed? What if they sacrifice everything and it's not enough?" Viktor was quiet for a long moment. Then he placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, on the spot where 194 stars waited beneath fabric. "Emma, Ghost 7, listen to me. You've done everything right, selected the best operators, trained them perfectly, prepared them for every contingency. If this mission fails, it won't be because of anything you did or didn't do. It will be because sometimes even heroes aren't enough. Even sacrifice isn't sufficient. Even the best warriors fall short. That's not on you. That's just war. That's just reality. That's just the truth that some battles can't be won no matter how willing we are to pay the price." Emma wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that she'd done enough, that Death Brigade 15 would succeed, that 13 heroes would die but 40 million would live. But doubt persisted, and in the darkness before deployment, Emma Hayes prayed to gods she wasn't sure she believed in, prayed that her unease was wrong, that her intuition was paranoia, that Death Brigade 15 would succeed where her doubts feared they'd fail. Tomorrow they would deploy, and Emma would watch from command, would listen to their communications, would witness their sacrifice, would carry 13 more ghosts. But tonight she allowed herself something she rarely permitted. Tonight, Emma Hayes grieved for 13 people who weren't dead yet but soon would be. Grieved for the futures they'd never have, the families they'd never make, the lives they'd trade for millions of lives saved. Tonight, Ghost 7 wept for the necessary monsters she created, the heroes she sent to die, the warriors who stood in the breach because someone had to. And tomorrow, Death Brigade 15 would deploy into hell, not knowing that Emma's unease was justified, that intelligence was incomplete, that the mission parameters were catastrophically wrong, that they were walking into something far worse than anyone had anticipated. But they would find out, in 19 hours that would become 37, in hell that would deepen beyond imagining, in sacrifice that would redefine what heroes could endure. They would find out, and Emma would listen, and 13 new stars would be added to her constellation of ghosts. Because someone had to stand in the breach, and Death Brigade never died. They just went darker. How do you prepare for death when death is no longer the worst outcome? The biological facility sat buried in mountains that had witnessed empires rise and fall, natural fortifications that made conventional assault impossible, man-made defenses that turned difficult into suicidal, and inside those walls, weaponized pathogens that could end civilization. Not dramatically, not with explosions or mushroom clouds, just slow rot, agonizing death spreading across continents like spilled ink. Death Brigade 15 inserted at 0300 hours. 13 operators carrying specialized equipment and zero illusions about survival. The insertion was clean, perfect. Textbook infiltration that would make any special operations instructor proud. They reached the outer perimeter without contact, bypassed security systems that should have been impossible to bypass, penetrated defenses that had never been penetrated. Emma watched from the command center 8,000 miles away, biometric data streaming from each operator, heart rate steady, breathing controlled, no signs of panic, no indications of compromise, everything proceeding according to plan. Brigade 15, this is Ghost 7, Emma transmitted. You're on schedule, proceed to Phase 2. Jake Morrison's voice came back calm, professional. Copy Ghost 7, proceeding to Phase 2, all operators green. The facility's interior was worse than intelligence suggested. Not in security, in horror. The biological weapons weren't theoretical threats. They were visible, tangible, rows upon rows of contained nightmares. Pathogens engineered to maximize suffering, to spread efficiently, to resist treatment, to kill slowly enough that victims infected others before dying. It was industrial-scale genocide waiting for deployment. Maria Santos's biometrics spiked when she saw the full scope. Emma made a note, but Maria's voice stayed steady on comms. Ghost 7, visual confirmation of weapons stockpile. It's worse than estimated. Much worse. Copy, Emma replied, her own heart rate increasing. Can you still neutralize? Affirmative, but timeline is adjusting. We need more time for proper containment. Another 6 hours minimum. 6 hours. That changed everything. Supplies calculated for 19 hours, now needed for 25. Tactical plan designed for one timeframe, now requiring another. Success probability recalculating. Dropping. 94% becoming 87. 7% representing almost 3 million additional deaths if the mission failed. Brigade 15, command is updating mission parameters, Emma transmitted. You have authorization for extended timeline. Proceed with proper containment protocols. Do not rush. Do not compromise. We need clean neutralization even if it costs additional time. Understood, Ghost 7. Jake's voice held no complaint, no hesitation, just acceptance. We're committed, whatever it takes. They reached the main laboratory at 0600, 3 hours in, 3 hours ahead of when intelligence predicted first contact. That should have been good news, should have meant more time, more margin for error. But Emma's unease had returned, stronger now, screaming that something was wrong. Volkov, she called to her advisor. Something's off. They're encountering less resistance than projected. Security is lighter, defenses minimal. It's too easy. Victor studied the tactical displays, frowned. You think it's a trap? I think intelligence was fed deliberately. Emma's hands trembled worse than usual. I think someone wanted us to send operators in, wanted Death Brigade to infiltrate. But why? What's the play? She ran scenarios, calculated possibilities, and arrived at a conclusion that made her blood run cold. They're not just weaponizing pathogens, Emma whispered. They're weaponizing Death Brigade. They know about us, know our protocols, know we send operators who accept death, and they're planning to use that against us. How? Emma pulled up classified files. Intelligence reports, pattern analysis, and found it, the truth buried in data. The facility is rigged, not with conventional explosives, with pathogen dispersal systems. When we destroy it, when Death Brigade initiates the containment sequence, the facility will release everything. Turn the entire region into a contamination zone. The operators will be infected, and if any survive long enough to be extracted, they'll carry pathogens out with them, spreading the very weapons they died trying to contain. Victor's face went pale. We need to abort, pull them out now. We can't. Emma's voice was hollow. They're already compromised, entered a contamination zone 6 minutes ago without knowing it. The pathogens are slow-acting, designed to have long incubation. They're infected, all 13, and if we extract them, we risk spread. But if we leave them, if we proceed with mission, the facility's self-destruct will release everything anyway. We're trapped. The enemy knew. They planned for Death Brigade. They turned our own sacrifice against us. The command center went silent. Officers staring at displays, at biometric data showing 13 healthy operators who were already dying, who would become vectors for the very weapons they'd volunteered to stop. What do we do? Victor asked. Emma closed her eyes, calculated probabilities, ran scenarios, and found only one solution, one path through hell that ended in anything except global pandemic. We change the mission, she said quietly. We can't extract them, can't allow them to leave, can't risk any survival. We have to make sure they contain the pathogens completely, which means they need to stay in that facility, seal themselves inside, destroy it in a way that ensures nothing escapes, not weapons, not contamination, not them. Emma, that's not the mission they volunteered for. They accepted dying in 19 hours, not being buried alive, not being sealed in a tomb, not suffocating or being crushed or dying of infection while trapped underground. I know, Emma's voice broke. I know, but if we don't do this, if we let the facility's failsafes activate, 40 million becomes 400 million, becomes billions. These pathogens are engineered for maximum spread, for global pandemic, for extinction. We can't allow any release, which means total containment, which means sealing them inside. She keyed the communication channel, took a breath that hurt, and spoke words she'd never had to speak before. Brigade 15, this is Ghost 7. Mission parameters are changing. I need you to listen carefully. Do not respond until I'm finished. She explained everything, the trap, the contamination, the altered timeline, the new requirement that they wouldn't be dying in combat, wouldn't be dying holding defensive positions, would be dying sealed in darkness, trapped, buried, suffocating or succumbing to infection while locked in a tomb they'd created. You're already infected, Emma said, her voice shaking. All 13 of you. The facility was designed to contaminate operators, to turn you into vectors, to weaponize your sacrifice. And the only way to prevent global pandemic is total containment, which means you seal yourselves in, destroy the facility from inside, and make certain nothing escapes, including you. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Jake Morrison spoke, his voice steady, calm, almost peaceful. Ghost 7. This is Brigade 15 actual. We copy all, understood. Mission parameters accepted. We will proceed with total containment. Seal ourselves inside, complete the mission, and ensure nothing escapes. Jake, Emma couldn't maintain protocol, couldn't hide behind rank and designation. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. This isn't what you volunteered for. This isn't what any of you signed up for. I should have seen it, should have caught the intelligence gaps, should have protected you from this. I failed, and now you're paying the price for my failure. Ma'am, Ghost 7, Emma. Jake's voice was gentle, like he was comforting her, like he was the one who needed to provide strength. You didn't fail. The enemy was smarter than we anticipated. That's not failure, that's war. And we're still warriors, still Death Brigade, still capable of completing the mission. The method changed, the suffering increased, but the purpose remained. 40 million lives, billions if we account for pandemic spread. Our 13 lives for billions saved. That's not failure. That's the best trade in history. Emma was crying now, couldn't stop, couldn't maintain composure. 14 brigades sent to death, 182 operators sacrificed, but never like this. Never with the mission changing mid-operation. Never with the cost increasing beyond what they'd accepted. You have the option to refuse, Emma forced herself to say. This exceeds original parameters, exceeds what you volunteered for. You can abort. Accept that the mission failed because intelligence was flawed. That's not on you. That's on command, on me. You can come home. We'll find another solution, another approach, another way to stop this threat. Maria Santos spoke up. Ma'am, there is no other way, you know it, we know it. The contamination is already happening. The facility is rigged. If we abort, if we evacuate, the pathogens release anyway. The only difference is whether we're inside or outside when it happens, whether we contain it or it spreads. The choice isn't between life and death. It's between meaningful death and meaningless death, between sacrifice that saves billions and sacrifice that accomplishes nothing. She's right, Jessica Stone added, her voice carrying certainty, strength, the kind of strength that came from finally understanding purpose. We're dead either way, infected, contaminated. Vectors for weapons will never survive, so the question is simple. Do we die trying to escape, or do we die completing the mission? Do we let our deaths mean nothing, or do we make them count? The others chimed in. Agreement, unity, acceptance. 13 operators who'd volunteered to die in combat now volunteering to die in darkness, to suffocate or starve or succumb to infection while sealed in a tomb they'd created, to endure suffering beyond what anyone should endure because billions of lives depended on their willingness to suffer. Begin Phase 3, Jake ordered. Total containment protocol. We'll destroy the facility from inside. Set charges to collapse tunnels. Seal all exits, ensure maximum containment, and we'll stay here, hold here, die here. Make certain nothing escapes. Not pathogens, not contamination, not us. Emma listened as Death Brigade 15 worked. Listened to their communications. Heard them prepare their tomb. Heard them set explosives designed not just to destroy but to entomb. Heard them methodically eliminate any possibility of escape, any chance of survival, any hope of seeing daylight again. 22 hours became 37, the extended timeline accounting for additional containment, additional sealing, additional certainty. 22 hours of suffering followed by 15 more of waiting, of knowing death was coming, of feeling infection progress, of breathing air growing steadily thinner as oxygen depleted and carbon dioxide accumulated. Emma listened to all of it, every transmission, every update, every moment of suffering she'd caused by failing to identify the trap, by sending them into hell unprepared, by being the monster who now watched heroes die in darkness. At hour 29, Jessica Stone began documenting, using her communication skills for final purpose, recording audio testimony of what was happening, of the facility's layout, the pathogens contained, the method of destruction, information that would help prevent this trap from working twice, help future brigades avoid the same fate. At hour 32, Maria Santos began treating symptoms. The infection was progressing. Fever, nausea, early signs of the engineered death awaiting them. She distributed what analgesics they had, tried to ease suffering, maintained her role as healer even as healing became impossible. At hour 35, the charges were set, the containment verified, the tomb sealed. Nothing remained except waiting, except dying, except enduring however long it took for suffocation or infection to end what had become unbearable. Ghost 7, Jake transmitted, his voice weak now, strained. Charges are ready, facility will be destroyed in 90 minutes. Containment verified, nothing will escape, repeat. Nothing will escape, mission successful. We're standing in the breach, like we promised, like Death Brigade always does. Copy Brigade 15, Emma whispered. Mission successful. I'm proud of you, all of you. You're heroes, the greatest heroes, and I'm sorry. So sorry for what this cost you. Don't be. Maria's voice was barely audible. We volunteered, accepted the price. And we do it again because this is what matters. This is what gives meaning to life. Dying so billions can live. There's no greater purpose, no greater honor, even if no one ever knows, even if our names stay classified forever. We know, that's enough. The explosives detonated at hour 36. The facility collapsed inward, tunnels crushing, chambers sealing, everything destroyed in controlled demolition that ensured maximum containment. Emma watched seismic sensors register the destruction, watched satellite imagery show the mountain subsiding slightly as the interior collapsed, watched biometric data from 13 operators flatline one by one as they were crushed or suffocated or simply gave up fighting the infection. Jake Morrison's biometrics lasted longest, held on for 3 minutes after the collapse, long enough to transmit final words through equipment that should have been destroyed, but somehow remained functional for one last communication. "Tell them we mattered," Jake whispered into dying comms. "Tell them 13 names that can't be spoken saved billions who'll never know. Tell them we stood in the breach, held the line, paid the price. Tell them dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Then silence, empty channels, flatlined biometrics, 13 ghosts joining the 182 Emma already carried, 13 more stars for her constellation of necessary sacrifice. The command center remained quiet for long moments, officers processing what they'd witnessed, understanding what death Brigade 15 had endured, recognizing that 13 volunteers had faced something worse than death and chosen it anyway. Emma Hayes sat in that silence, hands trembling, heart breaking, soul bearing weight that should have crushed anyone, and she thought about dignity, about sacrifice, about heroes whose names would never be known. 6 weeks later, she stood before the memorial wall adding 13 new red stars. The families had been told training accident, classified casualties, nothing more. They grieved without understanding, honored without knowing, mourned heroes they'd never comprehend. But Emma knew, carried their final words, their final courage, their final sacrifice, and she would remember, would witness, would be their ghost. Because Death Brigade never died. They just went darker, and somewhere in the ranks of arrogant young soldiers who thought themselves immortal, 13 more ghosts waited. 13 more volunteers who would learn what heroism truly meant. 13 more warriors who would stand in the breach because someone always had to. Emma Hayes returned to Fort Thunder, resume her role as contractor, civilian observer, harmless old woman with trembling hands, and she waited for the next threat, the next mission, the next brigade, because someone had to select them, someone had to prepare them, someone had to send them to die. That was her burden, her sacrifice, the price of being Ghost 7, the cost of surviving when her team hadn't, the weight she carried so heroes could stand in the breach. And when new candidates arrived, young, arrogant, certain of their invincibility, Emma would observe, would assess, would identify the 13 who had what it took, the character, the courage, the willingness to trade everything for something bigger. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. That was the lesson Death Brigade taught, the truth Emma carried, the memorial she honored with every breath she took and every ghost she remembered. Dignity didn't announce itself, didn't demand recognition, didn't seek glory. It just acted quietly, steadily, sacrificially. And in that quiet action, in that steady sacrifice, in that dignified choice to stand when standing cost everything, heroes were made. Legends were born, ghosts were created. Death Brigade 15 had acted, had stood, had sacrificed, and billions lived because 13 died in darkness, sealed in tombs, buried alive, suffering beyond measure, enduring beyond comprehension, choosing duty when survival was an option, choosing sacrifice when escape was possible, choosing billions over themselves. That was dignity, that was honor, that was heroism, not in parades or medals or public recognition, but in silent sacrifice, in classified deaths, in names that would never be spoken and actions that would never be known. Emma Hayes touched her shoulder, felt the weight of 207 stars now, 207 ghosts, 207 reminders that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to lay down your life for something bigger than yourself. And she walked into the Arizona sun, ready to select Death Brigade 16, ready to find the next 13, ready to bear the weight of sending heroes to their deaths, because someone had to, someone always had to, someone had to stand in the breach. And Emma Hayes, Ghost 7, sole survivor of Death Brigade 13, would continue standing, continue witnessing, continue carrying ghosts, for as long as threats existed, for as long as heroes volunteered, for as long as dignity chose action over words. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.